So apparently playable trolls weren't supposed to be a thing, and they were literally added to World of Warcraft last minute, and the original planned race were the ogres that Blizzard wasn't able to get on time, so they just ultimately removed them. Furthermore, we learned about the first WoW expansion that was supposed to be a pirate-based one that was ultimately scrapped and was switched to the Burning Crusade. Now, why this WoW veteran developer new interview is really interesting is that Blizzard has actually brought most of those scrap features into the game over time, from Azyata to the Dragon Isles to the Pandaren, which means we might be seeing some of these returning either on retail or possibly even in Classic. So what was WoW supposed to look like? Because initially it was obviously quite different. I've been using this wallet for nearly 3 months now, and it is amazing. Cash goes in here, cards go like this, and you even got this little tracker that you can find your wallet if you lose it through the app. There's so many styles you can choose from. You got premium leather, you got carbon fiber, aluminum, and they also have key cases that can also be fitted with the tracker so that you don't lose your keys as well. Best of all, these wallets are super affordable, and they're even more affordable if you use my code DORON, and you can get up to 25% off your wallets or key cases. So check out Extra. So just a few days back, we got a really interesting interview with one of the main guys behind the World of Warcraft Classic that gave us some really interesting behind-the-scenes information on how WoW was supposed to develop and how it actually developed, with races that weren't supposed to be there and others that were, as well as an expansion that ultimately failed and was replaced by the Burning Crusade, but most importantly, Burning Crusade was not the original idea. Now, while this is interesting in itself, the main reason I'm covering this is because I think this could actually be quite relevant to what is supposed to come in the future, and could potentially even have something to do with Classic and how that develops further, as this was all obviously meant to be content that was present in World of Warcraft that it never came to be, and they could eventually be trying to get all that back in. Dragonflight is literally the best example of this. All of you know the Dragon Isles, we know by all accounts, were supposed to be a part of WoW Classic like the original game, and they ultimately ended up just scrapping them. Originally, they were supposed to be like this old god, like the old god place, and now I guess they're just kind of there with a bit of a different storyline, but nonetheless they brought them in nearly 2 decades later. Also, originally Mount Hyjal was built with this crazy remnant of Archimonde. It looked quite a bit different, quite a bit more like a forest. Then they decided to scrap it and introduced a half-burnt zone that was present in Cataclysm. Similar thing could be said about the Emerald Dream. We were actually supposed to enter it all the way back in Classic, but it only happened 19 years later, essentially now in 10.2, which is going to be released in a few days. However, this additional interview also provides us with more information on how the playable races were supposed to be something different than how they turned out to be. So while the factions right now all are just loving and beautiful and cooperating, originally the more evil good extinction was obviously present from the start. Now, of course, don't get me wrong, the Horde was never really the bad guy, while the Alliance was perfect and the good guy, but it was obviously set up as the humans, the more normal looking faction, and the Horde was more geared towards monsters, giant orcs, half-decayed undead. Even the name itself obviously sort of biases it. I mean, Alliance sounds like something a country would create, something organized, while a Horde is usually this giant unorganized group with connotations that it is something more savage. This is also evident just with the architecture. I mean, just compare Orgrimmar and Stormwind even to this day. So one of the original races that was supposed to be playable were the ogres. They had actually built them already. I mean, that is exactly why they have all the animations, the sounds when compared to regular mobs. I mean, they even have unique dances. And keep in mind, I'm not saying like they put them on a drawing board and scrapped them early on. Like, they were literally building them. Like, they built them, they had them playable, and now they were stuck with a 6-week deadline for release, and they realized that not only would they need to come up with a whole new concept for female ogres, but they would need to make all the unique animations, armor, sounds, and everything. So what they did instead was they decided to kind of improvise in the last moment. They had already significantly developed the trolls in Strangletorn, very likely with female models already. They were quite fleshed out, out, so they literally just decided to swap this playable race last minute. This obviously ended up working well because the Darkspear were obviously developed. I mean, actually I would say they have stronger main characters than the Ogres. I mean, we had the whole Sen'jin, Vol'jin, Rakan storyline in Warcraft 3, plus it ended up kind of balancing up the characters as they wanted someone more lankier for the Horde. I mean, they already had the buff and the gigantic Tauren and the Orcs. The Forsaken were small, but the Trolls were like somewhere around the middle. Now, why I think this is really interesting is that Blizzard obviously intended to make Ogres playable, and as I said a million times in the past, they're literally a part of the Horde. I mean, Blizzard could introduce them tomorrow and they wouldn't need a single justification. Now, with the same bulky and lanky balancing out talk, originally in Classic the Pandaren were supposed to be an alliance race, the big bulky monster bear looking Pandaren. He doesn't exactly say who replaced him, but personally I think it is the Gnomes. I mean, Dwarves, Humans and Night Elves are really well developed in the game with quite a bit of a storyline, but the Gnomes barely got anything back in Warcraft 3. I mean, in fact the Pandaren were more developed in Warcraft 3, plus they could expand why they didn't really go through all that much effort to build Gnomeregan originally, like why they didn't have their own city. The only thing that doesn't make too much sense is like why the Pandaren would join the Alliance, as they seemed closer to the Horde back in Warcraft 3. However, as we know, that never actually happened. But this isn't really news. Like, we know that this was a Pandaren NPC back in the day that existed and they planned to do something, and ultimately they did. They became a neutral race. However, the most interesting thing this interview mentions is the fact that Blizzard literally started building an entire expansion and then they decided to scrap it in development because they couldn't figure out how to make it work from the technical side. So, as the developer says, the original plan for the first expansion after Classic was a so-called South Seas expansion. I don't think they really had a concrete name for this. This was literally going to be a pirate expansion. It was supposed to be water-based. They have pirate hubs that you would go to. We would be going to Naziatar, probably with heavy Naga involvement as well. The only reason they decided not to actually go with this is because they couldn't figure out how to make the water work back in the day, which is obviously not a problem at the present day. Additionally, they also released this really interesting internal map that they use for development, which kind of shows you how Azeroth was actually supposed to look. I mean, quite a bit different than today, with the Dragon Isles and the Zandalar being much smaller. The main issue with this map was that the lore was changing faster than they could actually update it, so that ended up being quite a bit of a problem. Now, obviously, we're going to know within like a day what will happen with Retail and Classic, but I do feel like this is a really interesting way to look at it, as keep in mind, most of these things were actually added to the game. It just took a little more time. We eventually got Zandalar, we now got the Dragon Isles, we got Naziatar, we got the Pandaren, we got Mount Hyjal, we got the Emerald Dream. Essentially, almost all of these originally Classic features eventually made their way into the game, albeit heavily modified, all apart from two things: the pirates and the ogres. Now, realistically with pirates, I mean, you can say they kinda added them. I mean, BFA was essentially a sea-based expansion where we got Naziatar, as well as some of these islands like Zandalar. We had the island expeditions, we had the ships. So you could say that ultimately this original concept made it to retail. However, what we never got until this point is the ogres. They obviously made the Pandaren that were planned, but ogres never made it, which never really made all that much sense. I mean, they got so many model updates over the years, so much new lore, new quest lines. They're still a part of the Horde and they're still not playable up to this day, which I think could mean we could be seeing them soon in some way, shape or form. You also might be watching this video after the BlizzCon announcement, but I do think this interview has potential to reveal what Blizzard might want to bring back to the game, either Classic or Retail that they never wanted to, especially now with Chris Metzen back, as he was obviously one of the lead guys back in the day. They now obviously have the water technology. They barely have any technological limitations. I mean, they added Zeralek Caverns, which was quite a new thing they were never able to actually accomplish in the past. The only thing they need to add right now are the ogres. Thank you for watching. Check out the Ridicon Sister and our possible return to Northrend in 10.2.5 by clicking on the screen, and check out my video on ancient Greek colonies in Spain by also clicking on the screen as well. See you next time.